So I find this kind of interesting. This is a late model in terms of development with American Flyer. This is kind of the best of the best. 1958 was the crest, if you will, of their development. This is my opinion, although I think there's probably some facts that back that up. But some of the changes they made are interesting. Number one, and I'm sorry I didn't record this, but these have the gears on the wheels are plastic. Now they're still steel or brass here on the armature, but these are it was so fascinating when I first started up this engine with the two motors on it. They were noisy, you hear the gears and stuff, and all I did was I took the covers off and put a few drops, or actually just one drop of lightweight oil, and it got quiet. It was so phenomenal. So no gear noise as soon as I did that. But the other thing that's interesting is look at these thrust plates. I'm going to zoom in here. Not only are they worn, but there are holes worn through them. Now they're just plastic. And I noticed that, and I haven't seen this on other Alcos, look how far forward the shaft sticks beyond the worm gear. I have not seen it sticking this far on any of the older Alcos that I have. So I'm a little curious, why did they do this? And I thought, well, maybe I should just cut that off. Well, then I'm going to roughen it up. I don't know what kind of consequences there will be with, the ends of the chassis where the thrust plates go, if all of a sudden you've got something that's going to be more abrasive. I probably could smooth that out, but again, I'm not working with any sort of lathe, so I got to be careful what I tackle and consider the outcome. So I'm going to just replace the thrust bearing or thrust plates, and as a bit of an experiment, where I work, we have samples of something called Formica. Formica is the hardest type of countertop plastic you can get. Typically, this is what you find in kitchens. They get a lot of use. It's a very, very wear-resistant type surface. So I've got a little bit of this stuff, a little sample here, and I'm going to cut it up into little squares, and I'm going to try those as thrust plates / wear surfaces, and I'll be curious to see, and over the months, maybe years, just if these hold up better. If these also wear through very quickly, the next step is going to be to actually use brass. I'll cut, again, small squares of brass and put those in here. I believe the original thrust plates were steel, at least that's what they look like. And so brass would be a little bit softer, still gives some place for the shaft to wear against. But that's kind of the plan, and I just thought this was kind of fascinating to see this, because I've seen dimples worn in these things, but so far every single one I've taken out has got a hole worn through it. So that's a little bit different. Well, just a few minutes ago I talked about the thrust plates being worn with holes in them. Now that I've replaced the thrust plates, I went to put the armature in and found that it's too long, literally too long. Like, it is wedged unevenly. So there you can see from the side, see how the side where my finger is angled up. That's because it's too long to fit. So no wonder those thrust plates wore out. So I am going to do what I said I wouldn't do, and that is grind away a little bit of both ends. At this point I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of a 1/16 probably. So that would roughly be equivalent to a hair and a freckle. So a hair and a freckle off of each end, and then I'll give it another fit test and see if we aren't a little bit better. We want to have a little bit of play. This is obviously none whatsoever. Okay, that didn't take very long. So this is the end I've done nothing to, and this is the end I've done some aggressive encouragement to, sanding, grinding. And what's interesting is it drops right in, and now I've got this kind of a play. I probably could have stopped and taken off a lot less, but to be honest with you, I didn't take off very much. I mean, if you look at the difference. Like I said, a hair and a freckle, and that's what I took off. So just that tiny bit, and now we've got enough play that there should be some wiggle room within the thrust plates to handle some of the movement now, and we get a little bit of movement. So be interesting to see once I put the motor back together. I'll do some dry runs with this on the rolling road bed, just to see what happens as I change directions, and just see how much movement we get. So, well, I'm happy with the results and the cleanup of this set of Santa Fe freight colored Alcos. I'm disturbed by the lack of traction of the A unit. I've done a little experimenting where I've removed the B and the second dummy A unit, and that helps somewhat. But at this point, there's something going on that this thing has such terrible traction. So I need to do a little experimenting and see if I can sort that out. So here we have the 5-digit Santa Fe blue and yellow engine upside down, and I think I discovered the traction issue. Check this out. Here's one of the traction tires. Obviously the motor is not running. Look what I can do to it. And the same with this one. That one's even easier. So basically it's like this engine not only has no traction tires, but only has 3 wheels on each motor that are grabbing the track. So no wonder it doesn't work. But when I took this off, I found that it's hard, and there's not much flexibility in this, and there's not going to be very good traction with it. So I decided to go a different route, and I'm going to use these. These are made by a gentleman out of Canada. His name's Don, and he calls these Get a Grip. And boy, do they get a grip. So I'm going to go ahead and put these wheels on this engine. I'm going to take, knock it over. I'm going to take this off and the one back there off. I'm going to use a wheel puller, and I'll actually pull this off, and then there's an insulator there, and I'll have to put that on the replacement tires, and then I'll use a clamp or something, and I'll clamp them down and squish them back down onto the axle, and make sure they're the proper gauge or distance between the two wheels, and then we'll put this on the track. And I know without a doubt that the performance will be vastly, vastly improved. So it seems that having traction tires that actually work makes kind of a big difference when it comes to how well an Alco will run. So yeah, it's doing a lot better now, and I'm gonna give it a little more time in terms of kind of breaking in here, and I think it's going to just keep running better and better, which it already has been so far. So go in the right direction. I hope this video has been helpful. Thanks. So I've worked on this engine yet again. The front motor was not starting with the second motor, or the rear motor. In fact, the rear motor runs just perfectly, but the back one was delaying in its start. So I took it apart, and this is the one where I had shortened up the armature ends because they were sticking so far out that they wore holes in the thrust plates. So I shortened those up about a 1/16 on each end. I could see there was quite a bit of play, as the armature moved back and forth. So I went ahead and on one end I put a small brass spacer, which basically limited the travel quite a bit. It seems to run better now, but I'm not convinced that it can't run better yet. Now what I've done is I've got it actually in third position here because it seems to run a little bit better backwards. You can see there's a little bit of surging in the motors as it runs along here. You'll see them kind of moving back and forth a little bit. But I've got my throttle at 15 volts, which is certainly better than it had been. Again, you can see there's just a little bit of movement. I decided to run it backwards because it runs better. Kind of like steam engines seem to typically run a little bit better in one direction than the other, and oftentimes it's reverse. This does the same thing. It certainly runs more in unison when the motors are running in reverse, or at least the front one's running in reverse, and the back one probably because it's spent most of its life running in reverse does very well. But let's go ahead and put it the other direction, and I'll show you how it does. All right, got the powered unit on the front now. Let's see how it does. You see, it's a little bit of herky-jerk, but the other thing is it's trying to run better though at lower voltage than it had been. So I'm encouraged by some improvements that happened again by I made a slight adjustments to the yoke and the screws that hold the field, and added that spacer. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and get a second one of these A units that I have, and let's just compare how they run. Okay, so here's the second 5-digit powered A unit that I've had for a little while. This one, just the short backstory is I did a repair of this engine for another gentleman, and as I was returning it to him, I just asked the question, what are your plans for it? And he said, well, I think I'm going to sell it. And I said, well, can I buy it from you? So I just bought it from him. I liked how it ran. I didn't have anything that was 5-digit in the Alco Diesel, so this is number one, first one I ever got. And as you can see, just looking at the roof lines, it has not gotten some of the TLC that the second set has gotten. But let's see how it does. Now, mind you, I have not done anything to this engine for, boy, probably 6 months to a year, and it's it's acting like it. It's not quite as peppy as I'd hope it would be, but let's just see if we see the surging in the shell, underneath the shell in the different motors. Oh, that's interesting. Now this has traditional traction tires on it. This does not have the Get a Grip. So it's struggling a little bit. That's really interesting. Okay, 14 volts. Okay, so it really does run very similar to the other one. And 14 volts is about where I get consistent operation. It's a little bit too herky-jerky at 12 or 13 volts. And again, this one has not had a touch of lubrication, which I like to do with them when I pull them off the shelf, and I was remiss in not doing that. So I guess maybe it's good to see how this one operates, and it tells me that the other one is running pretty much as it should be expected. So I think the solution is just to add more power. Well, thank you so much for stopping in today. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down history lane and learned a few things about 5-digit diesels. Until next time, take care, God bless, enjoy those American Flyer trains. We'll see you. Bye-bye.